another session of GCAN, Gallant Current Affairs and News Analysis. I have with me about 6 topics today. We will be dealing with the emerging countries needs women-led climate action. Now see, climate change is happening day on day and we are actually witnessing it. So what is the role of women in it? Opportune moment, it is actually relating to a topic of GST, how the GST revenue has been increasing and why there is a decent dip now. Aditya Element, functioning and purpose. In my last few classes, I have been telling you about the Lagrangian point 1 and the other points related, what is this mission, how much time it will be taken and all that. But today in this class, we will be dealing especially about the functioning, like what are the functions of all the payloads, 7 payloads that is actually going to be sent along with Aditya Element. Then we have exercise Thrissur, which is an annual Indian Air Force exercise. We will be dealing what that is. International Space Station, and we have a new it's a new update in our central digital currency systems. Now we have the emerging countries need women-led climate action. See, if you are looking here, disaster affects women more. So if you can see that women are more vulnerable, women, children, pregnant women are especially more vulnerable when it comes to climate change and the effects that relating to it. So in the recent time, we are already witnessing climate change right now. So how is that a woman, like why should we need a woman-centric more approach to the climate changes? And the article also mentions about some of the data as well. By the year 2030, there will be a reduction of 2.2% of the total working hours. So if you are looking, climate change is actually going to affect our working hours as well. It may actually dip to about 2.2% of the total work hours. Now why is there actual dip in the total working hours? Because of which, like, there is unseasonal excessive rainfall right now, there is landslide, floods, because of which and all the heat waves and such are affecting the human livelihood as well. So because of all this, it actually reduces the amount of normal working hours. You can see there is landslide in Himachal areas, there is Joshimath issues. So because of which all these issues affects the livelihood of the people, and when the livelihood affects, it also affects their employment, because of which the total time hours or the total work hours actually reduces. Now, because of all this, there is another data which we can actually mention in our mains as well, as there is a loss of 80 million full-time job that will be also be lost during this decade because of this climate change. There is 2 data which you need to remember in the case of working. There will be, by 2030, there will be a reduction of 2.2% of the total working hours and also the loss of about 80 million full-time jobs, mainly because of climate change. So, another problem which we need to hear is that there is migration happening all around the world. We have push factors and pull factors which affect migration. Sometimes we may be attracted to job, more potential in employment, maybe there is war and crisis because of which we migrate. But climate change is emerging as one of the major push factors because of which migration is happening. Like if you're looking islands like Indonesia and all, there has been, islands has been sinking, because of which the people are forced to migrate from that area. If you can look at the ancient examples, like we can actually talk about Sundarban's Delta region. Now that is a low-lying area, because of which the seawater actually rushes into the farmland. Even after the seawater actually resumes or goes back, the salt content actually remains in that paddy field, because of which it doesn't actually aid any kind of productivity in the farmlands anymore. So because of which the farmers or the agriculturists are actually forced to move from that area or shift to other practice, other modes of employment and such. Another example, you can actually look into a Bundelkhand region. Bundelkhand region is actually a very drier area. Now even if you have projects like CaN and Betwa linking projects in Madhya Pradesh, which actually aims to provide water for the Bundelkhand region, the area has been going more drier, because of which the farmers or the people are actually forced to migrate to other areas for better livelihood and opportunity. Now you can actually quote some of these both examples, because of which the migration is actually induced because of climate change, the extreme climate change that is already upon us. Now, how migration impact women? So if you are looking out, 80% of the displaced population due to climate-led disaster are women and children. So because of all the disasters that are happening, the women actually, if you are particularly talking about agriculture, majority of women works in the agriculture sector. But because of these heat waves or the climate change or such, they have to shift in patterns, so they have to actually shift or migrate as well. So apart from, because of all this, 80% of the people, displaced population are women and children. Close to 60% of the women population, if you are considering from South Asia, Africa, they are directly linked to agricultural activities, as I have told you. Of all the 60% population of women in South Asia and Asia, only 10% of women has actually any kind of land ownership. Income levels also reduces due to these kind of climate change phenomena. Out of 60% women population, only 10% of women have any kind of ownership as well. Now, availability of drinking water. So, if you are seeing a scenario in regions like very arid regions, usually we see women and children traveling a lot of distance to get water and such. So, when the aridity or this kinds of climate phenomena more frustrating, this woman has to work more or travel more in order to get any kind of drinking water for their families as well. During this travel, they may be exploited, sexually harassed, even trafficked. So, these kind of also puts an impact on the women population. Now, cleaner cooking fuels. Now, the accessibility is also reduced, because of which they have to actually shift back to more traditional way of cooking, and because of which they would be inhaling more smoke, because of which it hampers their health. Climate induced disasters. Once they are displaced means that they are migrating to a newer place. They don't have access to that kind of education or health or facilities that they were actually getting in their homeland or such. So, because of which they are actually further impacted because of this climate change, and especially due to migration into a newer locality. So, that is what some of the impacts of climate change which has hampered the development of women. Now, what is the way forward? Now, this article specifically deals about women and agriculture. So, we need to put a way forward that is similar to that kind. So, if you are looking, train the workforce into climate change resistant agriculture. Now, we have development of like new variety of seeds and crops which are much tolerant to the changing climate and such. So, we have to adopt that kind of technology, and also we should adopt more better ways of irrigation patterns that is available out there, so that we can actually have a climate resilient agriculture which actually provides more profit and more productivity to the farmers and the women who are actually practicing agriculture. Now, skilling and education of women. As you have seen, 60% of the women in South Asia and Asia such are actually depend upon agriculture. So, if you can actually skill and educate them, they can actually have better job opportunities in other sectors and not just restricted to the agriculture sector alone. And then, utmost priority is their healthcare. Even if you are looking at the sexual and reproductive healthcare of women, even if they migrate, their health is actually very important and it's a priority. And making them part of the decision making process, like we can see like in the PDS system, the woman is actually made the head of the family, so that the rise or such actually goes to the woman. So, such making them a part of the global decision making process then. And if you are looking, the United Nations can actually put forward some kind of standards, because of which woman-centric climate change actions can be actually taken by the country. It could actually induce a standard operating procedures for disasters, because of which a woman-centric help can be actually provided and women's protection can be actually ensured by this as well. Now, there are two such organizations which you can actually mention in your answers, like the SEVA, Self-Employed Women's Association, dealing with the helping of women in the agriculture sector. Gender and Climate Change Development Program, these are actually concentrated in the South Asian region. So, along with this, you can actually mention two such organizations that aid in helping women and such. So, remember the way forward linked to agriculture and women as well, and how climate change is impacting the lives of women. Now, moving on, we have opportune movement. It actually deals about the GST. Despite minor declaration, the GST inflows create room of expenditure tax rate. So, if you are looking, we can actually show how the GST revenue rates have been blooming. If you are looking into 2022 alone, the GST rates is actually an average of 1.5 lakh crores. If you are actually looking into 2023, for the first 5 months, the GST actually grown to about 1.66 lakh crore. Now, that's a very important development, and because of which there is a lot of demand, there is also a lot of GST revenues that has been actually increasing. But recently, if you are looking in this August, there has been a recent dip in the GST revenue collection. We have to look into the reasons for that dip. Now, average growth of 11.5% in the first 5 months has been observed in the GST revenue collection. The revenues from goods import rose to about 3% after 3 months of contraction. Now, you see, there has been an import of goods. Now, this doesn't show the basic necessary good that has been imported. Now, these are actually discretionary demands, like from the rich class or the middle class who can actually afford that kind of imports. That category of people is actually importing more such goods. No basic or necessary goods has been actually imported in this. So we can actually not provide like the GST is actually beneficial to all around the population. The revenues from the goods import rose 3% after 3 months mainly due to discretionary demands of the rich class and such. Domestic demands is fueling the growth. Even if there is import of the goods by the upper classes, there is still no reduction in the domestic demands, which is actually a sign of good growth as well. There is actually considerable amount of GDP and GST revenues which you are actually collecting. Now, inflation. Why there is actually been a dip? That major cause is inflation. When there is inflation which can be caused due to war, we know the Russia-Ukraine war is going on, and we can see how that war has actually affected our economy because of rising inflation in oil, in food prices and such. So if you are looking, if there is inflation, there is actually food prices are high. Now this actually creates a problem of indiscrimination. Now these food prices which are of higher price can only be afforded by the upper class of people. This is not available, or these are not accessible to the lower class. So because of which larger section of the people save money, like food is important for us. No, other goods are not that important. So the people actually save money so that they can actually spend money on the food items rather than other goods and such. So the demand on the other goods goes on, because of which the GST collection from the other non-food kind of goods will also reduce. That is, the larger section of people save money to buy food and reduce spending on other goods. The GST realization will come down if the demand on other goods actually go down. But we can ensure that there is festive season. We have seen Onam, we have seen Deepavali and such coming on, because of which is festive season there has been demand increase again in the sky route. So the demand has been varying. There is inflation at the one side, but there is festive season coming on the other side. So demand actually is varying, and because of which we can actually see there is actually varying in the GST revenue that is collected month by month. So if you are looking, there has not been a very considerable dip as well. There has been a reason for increase as well. So there is a mandatory e-invoicing of firms with annual turnover more than 5 crore, because of which the GST has been ensured, because last time before it was voluntary. If you want to file, you can file. Now as it has been made mandatory, the inflow of the GST or the revenue coming has been higher right now. Exercising loose ends in the trial tax and crackdown of evasion and fake registration. Like even of doing raids or such, if you are ensuring that the proper GST collection is done as such, because of which then the GST revenue will be increased and you will get the right amount of money as well. So this is the reason why there is dip and why there is still no bigger dip, and still there is growing incoming growth in the GST revenue collections. Now moving on, we have the Aditya Element functioning and purpose. So we know Aditya Element is going to be in the Lagrange point 1. This is the Earth, this is L2 point, there is the Sun, and then there is point L3. This is one of the stable lines. I have explained it yesterday how these 3 points are unstable, where L1 has our Aditya L1 and also another spacecraft called the SOHO. Now the SOHO is the Solar and Heliosphere Observatory, and this was actually carried out by the European Space Agency and NASA. Now they also are intending on observing the Sun. If you are at the point L1, you have direct view towards the Sun. Now in this particular point of L1, you can observe the Sun directly without any hindrance like eclipse or such. You can actually view the Sun. If you are at the point L2, I told you, this is not observing the Sun, but it's observing the deeper space. Like you have the James Webb telescope here, which is actually for observing the deeper space. Now the SOHO is actually already carrying out experiments regarding the coronal ejection, so sunspots and such in the phenomena that is happening on the Sun. Aditya L1 is also aimed at that point. It roughly takes about 125 days to reach there, and the total life cycle is about 5 years of Aditya L1. So what is Aditya L1 going to do? The main purpose of Aditya L1 is to actually study the corona. This corona is the outer layer of the Earth, or it's the outer atmosphere of the Earth. The corona is about 10 million times less dense than that of the surface of the Earth, because of which there is a very lower density that makes the corona much less brighter compared to that of the surface of the Earth. The corona represents very high temperature, and it's actually situated 1 to 2 times more than that of the solar radii as well. So if you see this is Sun, you can see this pattern observed here. This is actually the corona or the outer atmosphere of the Sun. If the surface temperature of the Sun is about 5000 to 6000 degrees Celsius, the outer layer is actually much more heated. But that is what the scientist has been actually finding. How is the surface, how is the corona has higher temperature compared to that of the surface of the earth. So that is still something which scientists we are pondering about how it's happening like that. Some scientists have stated that this higher temperature might be due to heat bombs. These heat bombs are actually, such kind of heats are actually ejected from that of the surface of the sun and they explode in the region of corona, because of which they have higher temperature. Now all these theory are actually not that much proven, and the Aditya Element's main specific is to actually study why the corona mass ejection and such actually take place. Now this particular corona is actually only visible during the eclipse. So if you are seeing like during the eclipse side, all this actually becomes black. So this area will be actually much more clearer. Or if you are actually using a coronagraph, which is actually used by scientists, even without an eclipse you can actually see this corona. Like see, this is what I have been talking about. During the eclipse time we can actually see this corona. All these white ejection particles that you are seeing is the corona of the sun. Now this is actually a photo taken during the eclipse time. If you are using a coronagraph, you can actually see this even without an eclipse occurring. Now what you are seeing here is all these black spots. These are called sunspots. So the next aim of Aditya Element is to study after corona is why is this sunspot happening and what is its significance and such. See, if you are looking before learning into sunspot, there is two terms you should need to know. There is solar maxima and there is solar minima. So Aditya Element is supposed to study the solar maxima and solar minima. Now the solar maxima and solar minima are some of the solar activities that are taking place. Sometimes there may be activities happening at the sudden rate and then they may reduce at that sudden rate as itself. Now it's equivalent to a fast phase. Now this happens in every 11 years. And this cycle is called as solar cycle. In the 11 years, there will be solar maxima and solar minima, which we can actually see. And this fast pace of activities and the fast pace of reduction of the activities, you can actually state it as solar maxima and solar minima. It happens at the solar cycle. So where the solar activity goes to the maxima and then comes again to the minima. So that we can actually experience in 11 years in a solar cycle. So during the solar maxima, the heat produced is also high, which leads to the creation of sunspots. So the sunspots are areas where the magnetic field, if you can see in that figure, these are areas where the magnetic field is much more higher, like 2500 times more higher than the Earth's, and even also the sun's surface or the core. So that sunspot has magnetic field which is higher than about 2500 times. So when the magnetic fields are higher and the magnetic fields are much more stronger, the magnetic pressure will increase in that particular area, because of which while the surrounding temperature is heat, because of the magnetic field, these sunspot areas actually witness a reduction of the temperature compared to the surface area. So because of which heat doesn't actually, in this area particularly, heat doesn't come out of the surface, because of which there is a dip in temperature in these particular areas and we observe it as dark spots in the suns. And this actually create much cooler area. When there is temperature dip in that particular area, you can actually witness that the temperature in the sunspot is much lesser than the surrounding surface area, which you can actually see. So that is about sunspot. So we can actually usually get visible wavelength. So if you are looking usually on Earth, we actually get or utilize visible wavelength. But during the solar maxima and such, there is ejection of, like there is higher temperature, because of which there is like solar maxima, it is the UV rays that the sun actually gives out and the Earth receives UV rays. So the Earth's atmosphere actually absorbs these UV rays, and the Aditya Element's another priority is actually to study the excess UV rate. It measures the changes in the UV rays produced during the solar maxima and solar minima. So up till now we learned about corona, what the purpose of corona, how it is actually happening, why corona has a higher temperature rather than the surface of the sun. Then we looked into sunspot, and now why there is a lot of excess UV rays ejection coming from the sun. So another thing which also the Aditya Element wants to look is the coronal mass ejection and leading to the solar winds. So if you are seeing, this coronal mass ejections are large expulsion of plasma and magnetic field from the sun's atmosphere. So in the last time you actually witnessed the sunspots. From the sunspot there will be a varying magnetic field. If the sun, you have sunspots here, there will be actually varying magnetic field in the sunspot area compared to the other area. So because of the expulsion of plasma, these magnetic field actually bends and then twists. The materials, due to magnetic anomaly, the materials get twisted and then tuned due to the magnetic anomaly that is actually present in the sun. After some time, they are unable to hold or attach together. You see, there is magnetic anomaly, as I have told you. They are actually attached to the surface in the sunspot area. But after some time, they are not able to hold it on together, because of which they actually to the surface itself, so they are actually released with a very high velocity, and they actually travel through the solar system, and we call them as solar wind. So if you are looking at this figure, there is here, this is the magnetic field I was talking about. This is where the sunspot's magnetic field is more high. After some time, it cannot actually stay stable, because of it get released, and they follow as solar wind. It comes and affects everything. It actually travels through the solar system and such. So if you are looking, these actually hit the planets. As I told you, they actually ejected to the other solar system, because of which they go and hit other planets as well. Like in Earth, we have our atmosphere. So these if there is a weaker atmosphere, it can actually penetrate much more easily. In Earth, we have weaker atmosphere in the North Pole and the South Pole, because of which they actually penetrate easily and they combine with the gases, and you can actually witness. It will actually create some of the charged particle, and we can witness auroras, northern lights, southern lights, because of which these are some phenomena that take place when this solar, like coronal mass ejection or solar wind, actually have communication with our atmosphere. And if you feel like they may be very beautiful, these are happening, it's very harmless and such, but these actually interact with our satellite system. It actually impacts the satellite system, the communicate system, the GPS system that is actually available, and it kind of disrupts the communication network systems that is available. So if you are seeing in this figure, you can see like this coronal mass ejections happening. You can see this actually coming out. This is the thread through which I have told you, and after some time it's not going to be stable anymore, so it actually comes out. You can see how this actually goes, and the magnetic field, that is the Earth, which surrounds the Earth, and how this coronal mass ejection actually affects it. I hope you have understood this figure. If you have not understood, please rewind the video again and watch it. So if you are looking, the Aditya L1 has 6 to 7 payloads along with it. So we told about what all the incidents are happening along with it. We are going to study corona, sunspots, coronal mass ejection, and solar winds. So if you are looking at the visible emission line coronagraph, now this is a coronagraph, as I have told you about, it is to study about the corona specifically. That is the belt that is going to be specifically study about the corona. Then we have the suit. Now this is a solar ultraviolet imaging telescope. These are specifically gone to actually study about the solar photosphere and chromosphere, to study the surface of the sun and what all the activities that are actually taking place. Then we have the ASPX and the PAPA payload. These are to understand the composition of the solar winds, about the coronal mass ejections and such. That is what this payload will be more dealing about. Then we have the solar low energy X-ray spectrometer and the hard X-ray L1 orbiting X-ray spectrometer to study the other parts of the sun as well. So these are some of the payloads that will be actually going along with the Aditya L1. So Aditya L1 is going to look into corona, sunspot, coronal mass ejection, and solar winds. These is something for that also solar maxima and solar minima. All these will be actually studied by the Aditya L1, and this complete mission is lasting for 5 years. So that is it about Aditya L1. Now we have exercise Thrissur. Now this is an annual training exercise that actually conducted by the Indian Air Force, specifically the Western Command of the Indian Air Force. Now this is an annual exercise, but due to some recent clashes in the Indo-China border, the Galwan issue and such, there has been a pause. Even if this is happening right now, when the G20 is happening, there will be a smaller pause there as well. So this is an annual, but there has been slighter pause. Now this Indian Air Force, if you are looking about this training and such, you might imagine like fighter jets and such. But this article, this training specifically actually looked into the transport utility, helicopters and vehicles. So if you are looking, if you need to take the military or the Indian army into the border area, and you need specific transport systems so that you can actually help this army to get that. So there will be transport utility helicopters. So if you are looking about 6,800 troops and 300 infantry vehicles has been transported by the Indian Air Force utility or transport helicopters into the bordering areas. So this exercise actually aims at, it's a pre-training exercise to increase the capacity and also the utilities of the helicopters and such that is actually available with the Indian Air Force. So remember the name, exercise Thrissur, related to IAF and specifically done by the Western Command Center. This is not dealing with any of the fighter jets or such, but about the transport utility helicopters for the carrying of the military and other personnel to the border areas. Now, International Space Station. So if you are looking at this figure, the SpaceX capsule has actually landed into the Atlantic Ocean, and they consist of 4 astronauts from the International Space Station, or they have actually landed back to the Earth after residing about 6 months in International Space Station. So if you are looking, you will be familiar with what is International Space Station as such. So International Space Station is a type of spacecraft. You can see this is a very big International Space Station that is happening in the low Earth orbit of the Earth. It is a type of spacecraft that stays in the low Earth orbit for a very large duration. Now recently the NASA and the SpaceX are actually going to transport 4 to 5 astronauts again back to the International Space Station after removing the present astronaut who was actually there in the ISS. This ISS is the largest single structure that has been ever put into space by the humankind. It is constructed and was completed in 1998 and 2001, and it is actually managed by NASA, European Space Agency, Canada, Russia and Japan. You might have heard the news that Russia is actually going to withdraw from the ISS as well, and they are going to plant their own. Even you can actually see China is actually prepared there or planning to actually put a space station of their own in this low Earth orbit as well. The significance, these are hosted research and actually educational studies from research of about 108 countries and areas and such. So the International Space, you can actually expect questions like this for your prelims as well, because you might you want to know about which all agencies like countries are actually a part of the International Space Agency, and the significance of ISS. These are something 2 important things which you actually might want to actually know, because there has been a changing in the astronauts. Like the previous 6 months astronauts have come down and the new set of astronauts are actually going into the ISS. Now moving into the last topic, we have the central bank digital currency. Now this is a recent initiative that has been launched by our central bank. Now these are actually low cost of insurance of money and transaction. Now this is basically that you have your own paper currencies. Now you can actually make it digital. It is also available offline as well. So they are actually trying to make the mode of payment much more easier in this. The sovereign currency is also issued by, this currency is actually issued by the central bank itself, and there is actually guarantee regarding its use as well. The liabilities in central bank, it is actually comes as a liability in the central bank's balance sheet, and this is actually accepted payment of a medium of payment, or it's also called as a legal tender, because it is actually accepted as a medium of payment by the central banks and the government. These are freely convertible to cash again. You can convert the cash to this digital currency, and you can convert the digital currency to cash, whichever is more easier. The holders need not have any bank account as well. You can actually do it as offline as well, and you don't even need a bank account if you need to have the central bank digital currency. The new update is that this currency, the central bank digital currency, can be actually used to now make payment across the border, so that we can actually have, if it is actually used as a legal tender in our nearby countries like Sri Lanka, Bhutan or such, this kind of payment can be actually used in this cross border more efficiently. Now this is a more cost saving in terms of logistics. It actually protects the people from any kind of exchange fluctuation rates or such. Like if you have a local currency, we can use that, like $1 is like 78 or 80 rupees. So there is kind of fluctuations in our own currency. Now because of the digital currency, such fluctuations can actually be avoided, and it actually protects the Indians as well. Now it also helps in the development of local foreign exchange and capital market of the rupees. It can also help withstand global supply shock with direct payment methods and mechanisms. So that is about the CBD. This actually concludes all the 6 topics we have today. I hope you liked the session. Like, please rewind it. If there is some topic which you did not understand, please look the video, rewatch it again. I'll be seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you and have a nice day.